What's going on, curious youngsters? Every day we use different objects, and many times we don't really know how they work. From a simple piano to the mechanism behind the toilet, we can investigate how everything works. For this and much more, these are 10 things you didn't know how they work. 1. Piano. The piano is perhaps one of the most important instruments in all of history, and if we look at how it works, we find the following. On the outside, we see 88 keys, divided between 52 white keys and 36 black keys. Inside, hundreds of strings are attached to a large steel frame, constantly withstanding extremely high tension. Once the pianist strikes a key inside the piano, a hammer hits a set of strings. Similar to guitar strings, these strings vibrate and ultimately produce a sound. But even so, the sound would be minimal, which is why the soundboard is needed. A wooden piece at the piano's base that vibrates and amplifies the sound, similar to a speaker membrane. And if you've ever wondered about the shape of the piano, well, it's because not all the strings are the same. Those lower keys have longer and thicker strings, while on the side of the higher keys, we have shorter and thinner strings. And finally, outside of the keys, if we look at the pedals that the piano has at the bottom, we find, for example, a sustain pedal. This pedal lifts the damper, allowing the string to continue vibrating, resulting in a longer sound. Alternatively, the soft pedal inserts felt between the hammers and strings, creating a softer tone. This way we can find various pedal types. 2 tasers. With so many people in the world, not everyone has good intentions, making services like the police necessary to maintain order. And as we know, for the police to be able to protect us, they need certain tools, among which we can find the taser gun. But did you know how it works? The taser gun has a battery located in its handle, which is responsible for powering the weapon. When the police officer, or whoever is using the weapon, pulls the trigger, this battery discharges electricity into the projectile, activating a compressed air capsule inside the cartridge that launches 2 darts at the victim. Each projectile or cartridge loaded into the weapon has these 2 darts, which are connected by a wire to the contact points of the taser gun. So when fired, these fly out, and as soon as they pierce the person's skin, they deliver the weapon's electric shock. A discharge of approximately 50,000 volts causes instant muscle paralysis, leaving the person motionless. As you can see in the video, as soon as it hits the skin, the muscles throughout the body contract immediately. Oh yeah, and if you were wondering about those little pieces of paper that look like party confetti, well, these have the serial number of the cartridge, so after an event you can know who used it. Tres bowling. If we stand on a standard lane and look at how it works, we'll find the following. Once the player drops the heavy ball down the lane, it starts moving forward until it gets close to the pins, where it will cross an infrared laser. And that's where everything starts working. With this laser, the machine is activated and begins to operate. The first thing that happens after passing the sensor is that the ball will knock down some pins, or it will go off to the side, if we're not very skilled. At this moment, a barrier descends to shield the pins from other balls. At the same time, there's a scanner that takes a picture to know how many pins were knocked down, getting the score, and also to know which pins need to be picked up. After picking up the standing pins, the barrier throws back any remaining pins that were left lying down, and the previous pins are put back in place so the second throw can be made. While this is happening, in the back there's a conveyor belt where the pins and the ball move along, and while the pins go to the back, the ball is forced to go off to the side, where it's placed on a rail so that by the force of gravity, it ends up in our hands. Finally, the pins go up on a conveyor belt and are placed in a machine. After the second throw, it will reset the 10 pins for the next game. Interesting, isn't it? 4. Granada. After having seen dozens of war movies, we understand that grenades take a pretty important place on the battlefield. But do you know how they work? The mechanism is quite simple. In this case, the grenade we're looking at is a fragmentation grenade. It's called that because when it explodes, it usually scatters shrapnel everywhere. This grenade shrapnel is the outer layer that shatters and sends pieces flying. But anyway, before it explodes, we need to know that it has certain parts or components. First, we find a washer and a safety lever on the outside. Then, inside, we have a spring with a hammer secured by the washer, a primer that will be ignited and will reach the detonator for the explosion. So the way it works is as follows. The soldier holding a grenade in his hand will remove the safety washer, which releases the hammer. Everything now hinges on the timing of the safety lever release. When released, the hammer strikes the primer, igniting a small charge that travels to the detonator in seconds. When the fire reaches this part, the detonator explodes, igniting the gunpowder charge next to it and producing the final explosion. Thus, removing the first safety while holding the lever will prevent an explosion. 5. Toilet. The toilet is an everyday object that we use frequently. But did you know that behind such a simple mechanism hides a true marvel of physics? The first thing we need to know is that underneath that ceramic structure, we find an S-shaped pipe called a siphon, which holds the answer to how it all works. The function of the siphon is simple. This part of the toilet is responsible for creating the siphon effect, quickly releasing the water, keeping the water level constant, and at the same time, achieving an airtight seal to prevent toxic gases from entering through the pipes. Once we flush the toilet, a good amount of water falls and carries away whatever we have left. When the water level rises, the siphon fills up, creating a siphon effect that sucks all the water out of the toilet. The classic noise we hear occurs at the moment when the water level is so low that air enters, breaking the siphon and stopping the suction. 6. Silencer. In spy or secret agent movies, they should have silencers on their weapons to reduce noise and avoid being heard, although silencers don't completely eliminate gun noise. Did you know how suppressors work? First, the correct term is suppressor, not silencer. Since completely silencing a gun is impossible, suppressors aim to reduce the shockwave, thus decreasing the sound emitted into the environment. A gun makes 3 sounds. First, when the hammer strikes the projectile. Second, the explosion. And the third, loudest sound happens when the projectile gases exit the barrel and expand into the environment. So, does the suppressor work? At this point, suppressors are designed to lengthen and widen the barrel of the gun. Through a specific structure, they will dampen the gas and allow it to expand without escaping into the environment. So, in this way, when the bullet leaves the gun, it creates such a loud noise. Be careful, Agent Bond. 7. Helicopter. Since we don't have wings like birds and some insects, the only way to fly is with airplanes or helicopters. And if we focus on the latter, did you know how they work? The helicopter has 2 rotors, a central one that does most of the work, and a tail rotor to prevent the helicopter from spinning out of control. When the helicopter starts its engine, besides generating minimal propulsion from the turbine, it also causes the main rotor blades to move. These blades work like our hand when we stick it out the window while riding in a car. We'll see how, depending on the tilt of our hand, our arm is pushed up or down, and, well, the same thing happens with the blades. By spinning rapidly at a certain angle, these generate lift, raising the helicopter. Once airborne, the main rotor blades vary their tilt angle, sending the helicopter forward or backward. But what allows the helicopter to move sideways is that the blades change their tilt as they spin, which forces the helicopter to move in a certain direction. The problem is that if the helicopter only had the main rotor, it would spin around itself. That's why the tail rotor comes into play, which is responsible for producing a force opposite to the main rotor, keeping the aircraft stable. Some time ago, our ancestors looked at the sky to know their location. Then they started using ancient maps. A few years ago, the beautiful global positioning system technology arrived. But do you know how it works? Global Positioning System stands for Global Positioning System. And although this may seem impossible to understand, it's actually quite simple. Once the satellites were placed in orbit, they send certain radio waves to the planet, which travel at the speed of light. Those signals will be received by your phone or Global Positioning System receiver. By measuring the time taken for the signal to travel from the satellite to the receiver, we can determine the distance between them. The satellites also have atomic clocks for the highest precision timing. With the distance to just one satellite, we can't do much. But if we measure the distance to another satellite, we can cross-reference this information. And thinking of these distances as a circumference, we can find 2 points where they intersect, which could be our location. But if we then start adding more and more satellites, we can start to cross-check the different distances from the receiver to each satellite, which ends up indicating our location. Thank you for the location, Mr. Satellite 9. Air conditioning. When we enter summer, some days can get too hot and we need fans or air conditioning. And did you know how it works? It functions similarly to a fan. We have a cooling lithium, a compressor, an expansion valve, and a set of pipes that run throughout the whole device. The refrigerant liquid goes from the compressor to the expansion valve, where it expands and takes on the temperature of the environment. In this case, from the room we want to cool. This way, the hot air leaves its heat in these pipes filled with refrigerant. The cooled air returns to the room. Meanwhile, the hot air flows through the pipes to the outside, where it is exposed to the air once more. In this case, the colder air releases heat outside. 10. Hydroelectric dam. I'm sure you've seen a dam at some point, either in real life or through a movie or television show. But did you know how it works? The operation is quite simple. After building a huge dam, water is taken from a river and kept in what is known as a reservoir. Once there, the water is forced to fall through pipes with a steep slope onto turbines. The force of the water moves these turbines, causing electric coils to move, generating electricity. Finally, the water that has already passed through the turbines continues on its way and is sent to a river or to a water channel. Before I go, I want to send greetings to Agus Martinez, then another greeting for Juan Sebastian Paz, another greeting for Jason, and a big greeting for Gimail Kime. And finally, a greeting for Papu Crack, another greeting for Leo, and the last greeting goes to the awesome King Dragon.